my heritage, for example, Italian, German, English, French. In my history, probably some African-American blood on my great-great-grandmother's side, but I'm blonde-haired and blue-eyed. If you saw me, you say, well, that's a white guy. Well, okay, I guess I am. I mean, clearly, that's the way I look, but my history is much more complicated. I come from a lot of different countries. I come from a lot of different cultures. So when people describe themselves, white people, like, oh, our heritage is being taken from us, it's actually the exact opposite, which is no, we have so much more to gain from each other when we share our cultures. And of course, the city of New Orleans, the city that has my undying love, the city that formed me, is a multicultural cauldron, that produced the best food in the world and produced the greatest music in the world. Jazz itself is a musical manifestation of different cultures melding, not clashing, but melding into a new thing that the world has never seen. And so I guess what I write about in the book is how much we've lost by seeing the world as a zero-sum game or according to race, by creating an unwelcoming environment and forcing 5 million people to flee the South. Now think about that for a minute. How many artists and poets and doctors and lawyers and scientists and engineers left the space that we are in right now, and as a consequence, we did not get the benefit of the great things that they bring to us, and how that was spread across the entire country. It's called the diaspora. How much did we actually lose? So I write about that in the book because people think that, you're just talking about how I help defend somebody else's rights. Well, that's true, but I was also defending my own right to have access to and be available to the gifts that God gave all of those other people that felt that they had to leave because this wasn't their place. And Wynton Marsalis told me this very specifically when I was talking to him about the monuments. He said, Louis Armstrong left here because of that. And I have had other great leaders say to me, I won't go there because of that. And so once somebody tells you that, you don't go, oh, you're an idiot. Oh, no, that's not true. You go, okay, well, wait, let me think about that for a minute. And how much have I lost in this conversation that we've been having with each other over the past 150 years? And how much of my kids going to lose because of that? And so it just is an acknowledgement. And one of the things I write about in the book that, you learn over time, because all of us make a lot of mistakes, is it's not so hard to say I'm sorry. And it's not so hard to say I forgive you. Although evidently it really is, because it's hard to move past stuff unless you get there.
It is when you're afraid, though.
Yeah.
It is hard to say I'm sorry when you're afraid of what saying I'm sorry will mean. Right? When saying I'm sorry might mean that you have to do something to make up for what you've done, when saying I'm sorry might mean that you have to allow people to step forward when you wanted that for yourself. That to me, I think sometimes we talk about this conversation as if nobody's got anything to lose. But, I don't think it's an accident that Donald Trump follows the first African-American president. And, if you're somebody who, even if you don't see yourself as in any way racist, you just have a certain amount of, there's a way things have been and you liked it. And, now things look different and you feel anxious and you're being told to say sorry for stuff that you don't even think you've done. That makes you afraid.
Well, those are all excellent points, and I agree with all of them. But again, in the speech that I gave, it's not a speech that condemns. It's a speech that invites people to think about these very issues. Clearly, a lot of people in America, for a lot of different reasons, feel alienated and not connected as a community. Whether or not this is the convergence of technology or what it might be, this is the moment where I don't think we really know, but we really feel something's not right. And if Cheryl and I have 5 children, when you have a baby and the baby starts to cry, they're crying for a reason. If a child looks anxious, they look anxious for a reason. And so one of the things that occurred in this election was that clearly, amongst many other things, white working class people raised up and said, I don't feel like you see me. I don't feel like you can hear me, and I have real problems. And they absolutely do. And it was a mistake for the Democratic Party to not be aware of that and to forget about that, or really anybody. Anybody in America that's hurting, that is anxious. But the next thing is important, which is how do you act out on that? What actually do you do? And really, what is the positive way going forward? So that's part A. Part B is on the issue of race. I have said this many times, it may not be the right thing, but you say, I can't relitigate whose fault it was. Clearly, nobody living today had any responsibility for slavery. Now, all of us have probably had, at least in the South, some ancestors that were involved in that and feel some sense of unnecessary guilt about our connection to that. Or we have had ancestors that actually fought in the Civil War and think somehow by making the acknowledgement that the Civil War was fought for the wrong reason, that somehow they died in vain. And I don't think we have to go there. I think we can recognize that the Civil War was a huge tragedy of epic proportions for the country. And we don't have to assume any fault for anything that happened in the past. I do think, however, that we all have to assume responsibility going forward about how to reconcile and fix that. So we should acknowledge people's anxiety and acknowledge people's pain, and also give room for the possibility that not everybody that is against taking the statues down is a racist. The statues, I found this out, were just kind of a landmark for people, modern day landmarks where they stood with their mother or father when they watched the Mardi Gras parade. And when they see it coming down, it's like watching an old building coming down, and they don't fully appreciate and understand the context of why they were put up or what impact they had on other people. But when called to do so, basically said, oh gosh, I didn't really realize. I'm sorry about that. And then everybody says, great, let's see if we can do something else. Because as I say in the speech and in the book, there is a difference between remembrance of our history and reverence of it and putting it in its right context. And of course, one of the great things about America is we recreate ourselves every day, and we get better every day, and we fix what was broken, and we make straight what was crooked, and we make right what was wrong. That's part of what we do and why we're such a great country. And there's no reason why we shouldn't continue to do it by confronting what the reality is about who we are and what we've been.